instead of thinking about how many words you have, leave them wanting more. A tactic that works incredibly well is having the three dots at the end of your subject line, the ellipsis at the end of your subject line, where you're creating that suspense.
I'm very excited today to be joined by Jay Schwedelson, founder of SubjectLine.com and president and CEO of Outcome Media and podcast host of Do This, Not That for Marketers. Jay, thank you so much for joining me today.
Excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
Awesome. So obviously, I'm a huge fan of yours. I've been following you on LinkedIn and listening to your podcast, and you seem to have the subject line universe down pat. So I was hoping we could dive into some subject line related questions and get your insight on that. So what would you say are some of the highly effective efforts or techniques that you've used when it comes to subject line to be successful in email marketing?
So the subject line is super important, right? Oftentimes marketers have it backwards. They work all on what's inside the email and they barely care about the subject line, where I come from the world that if you don't get the email opened, who actually cares what's in your email? And the thing about the subject line, the first thing you have to wrap your mind around is that people do not read the entire subject line. Period, end of story. They'll read the first half. I mean, sometimes I want to put at the end of the subject line, "You're a big loser," and just see if anybody will actually respond to that and say anything, because they won't read it. So you always have to think about, it's the first half, it's the first few characters. That is what actually matters.
Great insight. So this is a debate that I hear all the time of the word length for subject line. So you say the end of it doesn't matter. So should we even be writing the end of the subject line? Like, what do you advise folks on the appropriate word length?
I don't really get into, it should be this many characters, this many words. I think what you want to think about is, what are your first few characters and what are you doing in those first few characters to grab attention, because it will trail off after that. For example, we know if you start the subject line with a number, an actual number, the 7 tips for whatever, the 5 pitfalls to avoid, the 3 hottest fashion trends, just by having a number to start your subject line, it will increase the percentage of people opening your email dramatically, because it stands out. People understand exactly what they're getting out of it. It's very rapid that they understand that information. So what you're doing at the start, capitalizing the first word of your subject line, maybe using an emoji as the first character. The first character is hugely important for your subject line. Now at the end, instead of thinking about how many words you have, leave them wanting more. A tactic that works incredibly well is having the 3 dots at the end of your subject line, the ellipsis at the end of your subject line, where you're creating that suspense, where it says something like, have you seen, ... or just for affluent investors, ... So you're not even showing all the words that you really want to write, but you're leading people to wanting to know more. So it's little things at the start and little things at the end that can radically change the performance.
That's fantastic insight. I love to hear that. So that's actually leads me to my next thought, is to emoji or not to emoji. So I feel like we've gone back and forth. There's data that proves the value of having emojis, but should you have a brand emoji so it's recognizable if you're sending, say, an e-newsletter, so it's repeatable every time, they know it's coming from a brand? Let's say a blue heart if you have a blue logo, or a magnifying glass if you're an inspection company, something like that? Or do you say the emoji doesn't matter as much?
Well, I'm really glad that you carved out newsletters, because if you rewind 5-10 years ago, when people would send out their email newsletters, what they would do in the subject line is they would brand their newsletter. They have the name of their newsletter, maybe the volume, it would say edition number 92, and maybe the date. And that was the branding mechanism every time you sent out your email newsletter. But that evolved. Everyone realized that nobody will open up your email newsletter if that's what you're putting in the subject line, but you still want an element of branding. So if you look at the most popular email newsletters on the planet, okay, let's say Morning Brew, for example. When I say Morning Brew, a lot of people say, oh, I see that cup of coffee at the start of their subject line, because that's the emoji that they use. And the most successful newsletters will take an emoji. It'll be the first character of every subject line they send out for their newsletter. And then following that emoji, it will be the topic of that newsletter. And that recipe of using that emoji for every time you send out that newsletter for branding purposes, it works incredibly well. We all come to rely on it. We come to know it really well. But emojis for regular promotional offers, whether it's consumer or business, and businesses make the mistake thinking they can't use emojis, they really do work incredibly well. And the key things are this. Number one, you always want it to be your first character. Never using it at the end of your subject line is irrelevant. Nobody's going to see it. It's like, who cares? And you don't want to use it every time. It's something to have in your arsenal. Maybe every third or fourth email, you throw in an emoji. And for the business marketers that are out there, you can use an emoji of a calendar or a check mark. It doesn't have to be a smiley face or something stupid and ridiculous. Emojis work because they grab our attention in that millisecond social scroll when we're in our inbox. So to not use an emoji is not using everything that's available at your disposal to stand out. And that's what you need to do. When you hit send on any emails, you have to say to yourself, what am I doing in this email right now to stand out amongst all the other emails that are out there? And having a graphical element to your subject line is an essential component that allows you to win. And to your point, it does show in the data that it does work well. And the only thing I'll say about emojis, people will say, well, everybody uses emojis now. Mine won't stand out. That's what people say. But here's the reality. Only 5% of all emails that go out use emojis, 5%. Right.
Really?
So the overwhelming majority of emails are not using emojis, even though you may feel that way. It's probably because you're a marketer and you're just looking at it through a different lens. So you still feel confident that you will stand out.
I did not know that. That's a great stat. So one of my most favorite posts that you post pretty much every holiday is a screenshot of, like, you did it for St.
Yes.
Patrick's Day, all of the
Right.
four-leaf clovers, and at Christmas,
Yeah.
Halloween was another one with all of the ghosts.
Right.
So what is your take on, like, using the theme type emojis around holidays, especially obviously they seem to be a lot of B2C type of companies who
Right.
have sales versus like standing out? Like, what's the happy medium there?
That is funny because I actually do that on holidays a lot because whenever I wake up, I look at my inbox. I'm like, this is ridiculous. You don't want to do the emoji thing when literally everybody else on earth is doing the emoji thing. That's when you don't send out, right? So if it is St. Patrick's Day, okay, or it is Easter, and you said, oh, this is a great day to put a bunny in my subject line, no. That's what everybody's doing, and you won't stand out. Now, you want to stand out, okay, on St. Patrick's Day? Put a Christmas tree. You will stand out, right? So use an emoji that has nothing to do with that holiday. You'll stand out. But emoji use is most effective when it's not just surrounding a holiday. You do see some nominal lift if you play along with the party that is everybody doing emoji that day, but that is not indicative of the lift that you will see on non-holidays when you use an emoji and you really can stand out, because at that moment, so many of the emails are using emojis. So holidays are actually the time we don't go deep using emojis.
I love the Christmas tree. Just
Yeah.
let's get that out there more, right? I like it. So you talk a little bit about subject line formulas. And so you
Yeah.
obviously shared some insight on emojis and also using statistics in subject lines. Are there
Yeah.
any other special formulas or unique sort of insights you could give us, the trade secret of a formula that we could all implement right away?
I think the one that probably works the best, and you always want to keep this in your mind when you're sending out your emails, the sooner you could tell somebody who they are, the sooner they're going to want to engage. And what do I mean by that? If you could put in the subject line, let's say it's a business to business email, you tell the person their job function, they will open the email, right? So let's say you are a CFO and your subject line then says just for CFOs, or CFOs need to see this. You're like, oh, that's who I am. I'm a CFO. I have to open this up. Or if you're a consumer, let's say they're avid golfers. This is for top golfers only, right? Or they're an affluent investor. This is for affluent investors only. This is for DIYers. The sooner you tell the person exactly who they are and what they're interested in, they see it in that subject line, it resonates with them. They say, oh, this is not for everybody. This is for me because that's who I am. This is my job function. This is my interest. I'm a new homeowner for people who bought a home. Is that anything like that? Geography is another one. Very popular for people in Orlando. Oh, I live in Orlando. I got to check that out. So in general, the best formula is whoever you're actually speaking to, just flip the script and tell them who they are. And that is the number one tactic that will generate an increase in the number of people opening up your emails.
Awesome. So I see every marketer everywhere thinking, we probably need those buyer personas and the list segmentation that we've been avoiding for all these years.
Well, the funny thing about the personas is, so what do we do as marketers? We segment our databases and we market to certain groups, right? Certain personas, cohorts, whatever. But we don't actually tell the person they're in that group, right? We're just segmenting it from a targeting standpoint. But if you actually then tell a person, you are this group, you're this thing, people get excited. They feel like it's for them. And that's how we react.
Yeah, awesome. So, when it comes to email marketing, obviously we're talking about subject lines, but what are the key metrics that you typically use to show success?
I think one of the metrics that is most misunderstood these days is email open rates. So everyone's like, oh, in email open rate, you send out 100,000 emails, 20,000 emails open, your email open rate is 20%. And a lot of people believe email open rates are garbage now because they're inflated because of bots, because of Apple's iOS, that they're not reliable. And that is true, right? It is not an absolute metric anymore at all because you really just don't know how many people are opening. But very similar to a survey, your open rate information is a directional metric, meaning that if you sent out your newsletter today and you got a 30% open rate, and then next week you send it again, but this time you use an emoji in the subject line because Crazy Jay said to try an emoji and you get a 40% open rate, it doesn't mean 40% of the people opened up your email, but it does mean that the emoji had an impact directionally and more people opened it up. So open rate, I think, is underutilized. And what I think that most people in the world of email marketing aren't doing, when you go ahead and you Google, what's the industry average open rate for whatever, or click-through rate for whatever, you see these reports and benchmarks and all this nonsense with industry averages. And it drives me crazy because industry averages to me are total garbage for two reasons. Number one, who really cares what other people are doing in the industry? Different brands, different products, different whatever. But email is not just a thing, right? You have your email newsletters, that's a bucket. You have your offer emails, you have your transactional emails, you have your announcement emails. So what you want to do from a metric standpoint is take each of these different buckets of types of emails you're sending out, right? Your email newsletter over here, what is your open rate and click-through rate on average over here? Your offer emails, what's your open rate and click-through rate on those? And all the different types. And that way, then when you go out, you have to try to beat yourself each time. How do you improve in each of those different buckets on those metrics? It's not email as a whole because it's just very, very, very different stuff when you hit send. So that's kind of how I think about the metrics.
Awesome. All right, last thing here. If somebody is just diving into email marketing, what is one piece of advice that you would give them?
In general, I would say perfection is the enemy of progress. I live by that rule all the time. And what I mean by that is just send it out. Who cares? It's an email. If it doesn't do well, on to the next. You'll send out the next one. The majority of people are not reading about it. Nobody's caring what you're sending. No one's going to look at it. And keep in mind that on average, you will fail every time you hit send, even if you're the best email marketer in the world. And the reason I say that is almost every email does not get above a 50% open rate. Okay, they just don't. Right. So on average, the majority of people that you're emailing to, even if you're the best marketer in the world, the majority of people are not opening up your email. So who cares? Just send it out. Stop stressing it out. Life will go on, and test. Always be testing.
Great insights from the Jay Schwedelson. So thank you so much for joining me today. I will plan to post links to Jay's LinkedIn profile as well as his various websites and podcast in the show notes. And thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
I can't wait to listen to all this and all the other speakers and guests and whatever. This is amazing. And thanks for doing what you do.
Awesome. All right. Bye now.